One, two. Okay, tonight we are finishing up the book of Tanya. You guys ready? Mm-hmm. I know you all feel that you've got a solid grip on the book. No. Or, yeah, I'm joking. We got them, huh?
I was actually thinking earlier today that this specific course should have been longer.
Should have been longer. Yeah, there's so much packed in here. Really, it's giving us a bird's eye view on what Tanya is and what tools it can offer us in our lives. And what we're going to focus on tonight is we're actually going to take the whole last section of Tanya and cram it into one book. So if until now we've covered a lot of ground in one class, tonight we're taking the greatest piece of Tanya, meaning say the greatest bulk that we've ever covered in any of these classes, and we're sticking it into one class. Tonight we're covering chapters 41 to 53. Okay? Tonight's class. And with that, 53, as we've spoken, 53 is actually gun, the Hebrew word gun, which is the garden. That's how many prakim there are in Tanya. G-A-N. Yeah.
Isn't that beginning now?
No. Oh, begin? No.
Oh.
Gun? No, not begin. Garden.
So what does it mean?
Garden.
Oh, that makes sense. It's like the flowers they grow, maybe that's what it's like. Wow.
Okay.
I was misguided.
Begin, begun. Yeah, similar.
No.
No? Okay. What else has 53 chapters? 53, the number 53, anyone?
That's the day in which the reading happened on the holiday last week that we just celebrated, and that's when he got liberated out of prison.
So 53 days Alter Rebbe was in prison, absolutely. Which is interesting how it parallels. Tanya had just come out before that, and interesting how it parallels 53 books in the Torah. 53, sorry, not books, but 53 parshiot. Portions. 53. Right, but some are doubled. And remember, 52 weeks is in the secular year, but in the Jewish year, there's less than 52 weeks. Because in a secular year, you have 354 days. How many weeks?
Yeah, 365 days.
52?
52 weeks in a year.
52, so it's less. 354, you have less than 52 weeks in the Jewish year, because there's less days in the Jewish year. Make sense? Does that make sense? Like a week is irrespective. 52 is exactly into 365, right?
But 365, they're left with the thing.
Okay.
And there's the counting year was 360 now. But 365 is the day count.
Okay.
I believe.
Anyways, some parts are doubled up. That's how
that.
And that's depending on the year, depending on how it falls. A leap year, you'll obviously have it stretched out. Yeah, that's how it's the general thing. Okay. So what are we focusing in lesson 6? Lesson 6, we are going to speak about, I'd say in a certain sense, it's the Alter Rebbe is getting us ready for our lifelong journey of self-transformation and spiritual service. So kind of if we looked at the progression so far, and that's we've spent quite a bit of time every week going over the progression. Let's do that right now. Lesson 1, chapters 1 through 8. What did we walk away with from that lesson? Lesson 1.
Animal soul, godly soul.
Animal soul, our inner anatomy, and we came to understand the nature of our struggle, right? From coming. Then we came to chapters 9 through 14, or 8 through 14. One sec. Want to get it? There you go. I can get it myself, but you want to see this dropped out? Let's stop the recording one sec. Okay. So if we're going to, in this lesson, we're going to kind of have and I said what we're going to do is going through quickly the review of the chapter. So lessons. Lesson 1 we covered. Lesson 2, what did we walk out after lesson 2, covering chapters 8 through 15? Anyone remember? after we came to understand the struggle, what was the next thing the Alter Rebbe taught us was?
The garments. The garments.
The garment, that was part of our inner anatomy, coming to understand it.
And the thoughts.
What about the thought, speech, and action?
Thought, speech, and action.
How to manage the conflict. Exactly. What were the tools that we taught in lesson 2? How to manage the conflict?
That we're going to control the impulse.
Exactly. Using our natural, inborn ability of mind controlling the heart, where we naturally have an ability to control ourselves, to control our self-expression, which means that a place of thought, speech, and action, our behaviors, our thoughts, our speech, and actions can be all controlled, and that's what tool we learned in lesson 2. Lesson 3, we then said, no, remember what lesson 3 is? Okay, what's the next problem? So that's going to be great. I'm going to be forcing myself. But my insides are not holding there, I need to bring up my insides, otherwise it's going to be untenable the whole time to be kind of controlling myself if I don't feel any of that. So we actually discussed from chapters 15 through 24, we discussed 2 ways to bring our insides somewhat to the table in terms of creating an emotional congruity to our behaviors. So our behaviors would be what they are, and our feelings would also somewhat be congruent with that. Remember what those 2 ways were? Short way and the long way. Exactly. Then we went next lesson number 4. We said, okay, so we've got our behaviors in place, we've got our emotions up to par, and they kind of are backing up our actions and our behaviors. What was the problem now? Stuff happens. Doesn't always all go according to plan. Chapters 25 through 34 were all focused on life. Attaining joy even when things are difficult. And remember how we laid out how joy is so imperative. That's not a luxury, it's an absolute necessity for the whole battle to remain under control. Remember? Then we went and last class we discussed the crisis that the baby has, where he turns around and he says, what's this all for? I'm never going to anyways manage to become a tzaddik. I'm never anyways really going to self-transform. I'm always going to have these animal impulses in me. So what's it all for? Why am I born to struggle? And we discussed and we came to understand, we told the baby, you got the whole thing wrong. You are focusing on action, not because that's your last resort, that's all that you can manage to do. Action is actually where it's at. Action is actually what counts. Action is actually what changes this world and makes this world a godly place.
So the fact the Benoni gets the privilege of practicing the action, because that's really where it's all
absolutely
it manifests.
Absolutely. That's really where the battle is playing out there, and it's not for nothing. That's where the real action is. So, of course, if your insides can turn over and you can self-transform completely, like a tzaddik, that's the ultimate, your insides and your outsides match. But to think that your outsides and working your whole life and struggling to get your behaviors in place and to make your actions, your thoughts, speech, and action, and that's irrelevant. We basically came out of last lesson telling the baby, you got it all wrong. This is not pointless. This is exactly the point. And we discussed that at length. Okay, so where are we now? So where this lesson is going to pick up from is we're going to kind of pick up on something that we focused on last lesson to kind of clarify it, and then we're going to segue into the long-term work. One thing we said last lesson, which was we kind of glossed over quickly because we didn't have a lot of time, was yes, Beinani, it's all in action. So then what's the reverse? What's the flip side? So if it's all in action, so who cares? I might as well not even put any work into the intention side of things. Who cares if I wrap tefillin and I'm thinking about God, or if I'm thinking about the soccer? The main thing is I wrap the tefillin. Who cares about the kavanah? Who cares about the intention that we're putting into our action? And we ended up last class, which was already 2 weeks ago, it's a while, right? So we ended up last class saying no, because yes, the action changes the world, and action is what makes this world a godly place. But action infused with emotion is the ultimate form of action. Creates a beautiful home rather than just a basic home. We described it as the wings. You remember? We described there's the bird and there's the wings. You could have a wings without a bird, but you can't have wings. You could have bird without a wings, but you can't have wings without a bird. The emotions are the feelings are the wings. They lift up the actions. And they make the actions all the more powerful. But to describe them as being everything, no, action still remains, but it doesn't minimize the impact of emotions is essential, and every mitzvah which is infused with emotion, every mitzvah which is infused with the love of Hashem or etc., has all that more power. Okay. So what does that leave us off with? That in action, that emotions are kind of all they are is they augment the action. Emotions augment the action. Are they everything? No. And what we're going to focus on in chapters 41 to 50, to 41 till really 50 is 41 to 50 is saying action, emotions are something really important. And we should spend our lives developing a feeling towards God and godliness, and a feeling of developing this relationship at a feeling level. Why? Because emotions ultimately are the foundation and the ultimate motivation which get us onto track to doing the good things that we do. The foundation of the action, the foundation of the behavior. Yes, you can force yourself, but in truth, the more we can cultivate feelings, the feelings will be a foundation for those behaviors. So in a sense, we're going back. In a sense, we're going back to 16 and 17. Remember what 16 and 17 were? Emotions, which what did we spoke about in 16 and 17? The emotions, and it was about the long way, creating the feelings. So in a sense, we're going back there. But the reason we're going back there is because we're kind of, the Alter Rebbe is leading us with the long-term work. And what we're also going to do here is we're going to describe the meditative process much more in detail. Okay? So in terms of the long-term work, we're in the long haul. We want to, you finish the program. What are you going to go home with? What are you working on? You're working on creating constantly a meditative process which is going to constantly transform you as a person, because it's going to constantly work on your insides to create and develop the things that the direction you want to go. It's a lifelong work. That's where you're going to be. That's where you're going. So you got the program, now get to work. What are you working on day to day? You're constantly, every day, you're going to be focused on Itbonanut. Itbonanut is pointed meditations, focused meditations, where you're concentrating your mind on a specific idea, a specific thought, which you're then going to think about, which is going to develop feelings. Okay? So that's 41 to 50. And then really 51 to 53 is a whole separate topic, which wraps up the Tanya, and we'll talk about that at the end of the class when we get to that part. Okay. Now, one just in order to create feelings, right? We're talking about creating feelings. Very important to get back to our anatomy. How does our a spiritual anatomy work? So we actually spoke about it in chapter 1, which I didn't point out to you. Chapter 1, and Tanya already speaks about this idea that there's chapter 3 that we have 10 insides. Remember the 10 insides? How does that split up? 10 insides split into
7 and 3, and the 3 are the garments and the mantras.
before inside. Garments are what? Outside.
That's the sorry. 7 and 3 is the
Help.
what is the step one? So it's
3 is our intellectual capacity, our ideas, not our thoughts, our ideas, our right, and and then there's our emotions, 7 emotions, right? So that's how we flow. We flow from a place of our ideas, our things that are circulating in our head, the ideas that we focus on. Those are going to give birth to emotions. Okay? That's how we are wired. The mitzvah of tefillin is directly connected with our mind and our heart kind of syncing up. That our minds and our hearts should be in sync with one another. Our emotions should be in line with what's going on within our in our
intellect. You're speaking about it as if it starts here and goes down to the body. I always had the opposite impression, but that was just mine.
That's what
I thought that it was more going from the lower parts of our body, literally from the feet upwards through the body. And then it came up through the abdomen, through the chest, through the arms, and then up to the head.
So interesting. One of the things where a human being is unique is we walk upright, and an animal walks horizontal on a good day. Right. A human being, when he's upright, the more superior abilities of the person are at the top. That's how we're supposed to flow down. An animal, very interestingly, is horizontal. And from the point of Hasidus, from the point of Jewish mysticism, that's because an animal is wired. It doesn't have this unique advantage of mind ruling heart that we have. And this whole intellectual ability, which then gives birth to emotions. What am I talking about? I'm talking about like this. We can create feelings. That's the basic of it. How do we create feelings? We create feelings by thinking and meditating on specific ideas, which then generate an emotional reaction. If you'll remember, we've spoken about this before. Remember that parable I gave you about the football team, where I had no feeling for the football team at all. I couldn't care about it whatsoever. And then I started reading every day the stats, whatever it is. And just the very fact that these ideas are now, by the end of the season, I've developed some emotional attachment to that. We spoke about the negative side, if you remember. The bad meditations, anxiety, stress, what else would resentment are all meditations, but they're negative meditations, where we are concentrating our mind actively on a pointed thought, saying, he's probably not going to answer my phone, or he's probably not going to want to meet me, or I'm probably going to miss my flight. And when we start to think, we start feeling that big time. We can even start getting extreme physical reactions because of that, right? Is anyone ever read the book 7 Habits for Highly Effective People? No? Classic.
I heard about
It's a good book. Very good book. Stephen Covey. So he, in the beginning of his book, he speaks about an episode that happened to him. He's on the subway, I don't know if it was in New York or whatever. I think it was New York. He's on the subway and he's sitting there, now they went to some train. He's minding his own business, and then this father walks on with like 3 kids. and the kids start making the biggest racket. They're running and they're jumping and they're standing on the seats, and that whole peaceful, calm train cabin turns into this war zone because of these kids. He's sitting there going, why doesn't father just get his kids under control already? At some point, like one of the kids threw something, and he's like, would you please just get your children under control? Says the father. And father hears it and says, sorry, sir, I'll be honest, we're just coming from my wife's funeral, and the kids don't know how to handle it. I don't have the strength to buckle them down. Just please understand the situation. And he describes how suddenly within himself he was like, all of a sudden, instead of feeling this anger or whatever, he started like getting really compassionate towards the people. What is that? What just happened here? Now, this is a fundamental idea within Hasidus. We often find ourselves justifying the way we feel because of the situation, because this is who I am, because this is happening, whatever it is. And Hasidus says, hold on a second. It might be, yes, you can justify it, but you can also go one step higher, which says you are feeling a certain way, but you can create a different way of feeling about the situation. How? By going up to the top, by going up to create a new emotion about the situation. Now, it's not easy. It's a meditation. It's a difficult process, but the very fact I feel a certain way about a situation doesn't mean that that's the way that has to continue to flow. We can change how we feel by, sometimes it's just easy changing of thoughts. Sometimes it's a more meditative process where we have to create new thoughts. We need to create new to change how we feel in a situation.
In that story, it was made a little bit as uncomfortable as it may have been.
Right.
Or awkward.
Right.
It was made a little bit easier for him because he got more information.
Sure.
And although there might have been people on the train, I can picture in the New York subway car, he's very judgmental of this guy. In fact, he did everyone on the train a big favor. By asking what's going on.
So what you're saying
well, maybe
is true.
He could have, in hindsight, he could have said what's going on before he went to judge the kids.
So
he could have asked.
So
like that's nothing you know.
Right. But what you're saying is true, and I think that process can happen inside too.
Well,
we don't always have to get
it. Right. We want to ask ourselves the question.
Exactly.
What is this person going for?
If that and within ourselves. Right. I'm focusing on the negative. I'm not. Think about a relationship. Right now with my spouse, we're not exactly having such love between us. Or I'm not so interested in going out for a date right now. I had a hard day at work. I'm not so interested in going out on a date right now. I'm not feeling in that mood. Can I create feelings? So the answer is absolutely yes. If I would take a few moments now and think about what it means, my relationship, how much this means to my spouse, how much in general, I'm saying, right? We think we can create feelings which will lend itself to love, to increase bonding, to increase togetherness, which I could stop and say, okay, well, I'm not in the mood, and that's it, walk off. Or I could kind of leave the relationship hanging where it is, where we're right now at this place where there's a, or I can say, okay, sometimes there's genuine issues, but a lot of times it's, can I now create, bring to this new feelings based on my meditative process? And the answer is yes, you can. That's what we're talking about here. It reminded me of a story. There was a Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. You remember Jonathan Sachs? Rabbi Jonathan Sachs was former chief rabbi. I was going to say president. Former chief rabbi. I think that's former chief rabbi of the UK. Right? Allah Shalom. I think I did that once. No, I did it. Probably was the last time.
No, I didn't see.
I think so. So he he came to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and I've told you the story where he came, went around Jewish leaders, asking them each one questions. He was in Cambridge at the time, studying, and he did this world tour asking Jewish leaders, part of his thesis, if I'm not mistaken. And he came to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe was the first one who, instead of just answering his questions, posed questions to him. And what questions the Rebbe said? The Rebbe said to him, "What are you doing for Jewish life in Cambridge?" So Rabbi Sachs, you have to hear him tell the story. He says, like a good Englishman, I started to respond in the situation that I find myself. The Rebbe stopped him. The Rebbe says, one doesn't find himself in a situation, one puts himself in a situation. Now, well, he speaks about what that meant to him, but hold on a second. One doesn't find. What does that mean? I'm saying to a certain extent it means this. Yes, things could be happening around you, but that doesn't mean that you need to be locked into this way of mindset or this way of mindset. You can create a mindset which lends itself to whatever the situation is, to the outcome that you want it. It's a lot of it boils down to what you meditate process. Okay? That's what we are focused on here. We're focusing on creating feelings which are going to change our insides. Remember, this is all about our insides. Why is it so important to do this? Okay. Why it's so important to do this is because these emotions are the foundation for our spiritual life. The more I have a feeling for God, the more I'm likely to do what God wants. Now, it's going to split into two general emotions we're talking about here. Two emotions are ahava v'yira. I'll translate them as love and awe. And the general emotions that are generally spoken about kind of fit into these two emotions. Ahava v'yira are opposites. Why are they opposites? Let's think about it. Awe. Okay? What is awe? Awe, when you say, I'm in awe of you, is awe a negative emotion? No.
No, but it's a separating emotion.
Okay. What do you mean, no?
Not negative. It's positive. Looking at someone with respect,
Okay.
admiration, I guess.
Okay. Does it bring you closer to that person?
But I think it's almost like at a higher level of a different. Yeah, it's a different level of what seems to be almost. It seems to be undertaken. The average. It's like
Good.
that's tremendous.
Good. Yeah.
Like the days of awe.
The days of awe. Exactly. So what are we talking about? Something is awesome, right? Something that instills awe in us. Imagine you're looking out at I don't know,
Beautiful
the Grand Canyon. You're looking at, you ever lay down, look at the stars in the night where you see that you sense that awe, the expanse of the universe, it's seen. What does that do? It makes us become aware of our own insignificance, right? There's something so much bigger than me that we feel our own insignificance. That's what awe is. Awe is something that because I behold the greatness of something else, so what does that do to me? That makes me feel insignificant. And I'm in awe. In awe is not something that's kind of I shirk back because it's overwhelming. That's what awe does. because something's overwhelming, I kind of step back and I like observe it, and I kind of feel like I've lost myself within it. Love, on the other hand, is the exact opposite. Love, on the other hand, is about going closer. Love, on the other hand, is connection, exactly. Drawing close to something which is pleasing. Or is kind of stepping back from something which is overwhelming. Make sense?
Yeah.
No, I accept it.
Except, okay, understand it? Yeah. Now, these two are
Well,
going to,
acceptance is a big part of the previous thing we were talking about the situations. Trying to lean into meditating around something to create your own feelings. If I become accepting of not trying to control that situation and try and adjust for me, and it makes it much more of a manageable, not conflict, but a manageable situation. Because I'm managing me,
correct,
not all these other pieces
Correct.
that are around.
correct, absolutely right.
Him and you and them and the wall and
Absolutely right. And I think that's a very strong point, because really all of this whole idea that we're speaking about today lends itself very much into getting rid of anxiety, because what we're talking about is we're talking about creating an inner space, which is creating new feelings for, yeah, okay. So let's get back. So love and awe, they are going to be the foundation for the mitzvahs in the Torah. Why? We have mitzvahs in the Torah which are things that Hashem asks us to do. You think that's motivated by love or motivated by awe?
How is all related to fear?
Okay, we'll talk about it in a moment. Good question. Because yirah, often people translate as fear.
Yes, and also, or I think I understand what it means in English, but obviously I'm not a native speaker.
Good.
So,
Yeah. Okay, good question. Generally, mitzvah split into two categories. We have how many mitzvahs in the Torah? 613. Split is 365. Easy to remember 365. Negative mitzvahs, which means God says, don't do this. And 248. 248, yeah. Positive, which is do this. And often it's described as the foundation for the performance of the positive is our love for God. Think about a relationship. Do this for me. How can love motivates us to want to do something for the person we love? Or in relationships, often can translate into respect. They give you your space. I respect your wishes, even if I don't understand it necessarily. Yeah?
which one's 365? Which one is what?
365 is negative. Negative. Don'ts. So the cultivation of a love for Hashem and a fear for Hashem gets to the heart of what these chapters is these ultimately, they're not just the how do we describe it for, like augmenting our action. They're intensifying the action. They are primary motivators of our action ultimately. We spoke about before doing something with kavanah, so it intensifies it. Here we're describing the emotions as being, they're not just intensified, it's recognized. If you're going to have a love for Hashem, that's going to help you fulfill the 248 positive mitzvahs of the Torah. If you're going to have all of Hashem, that's going to help you fulfill the 365 don'ts in the Torah. Okay? Now, let's start with describing, and we're actually going to go through a meditation, which Tanya speaks about. Many levels of this level of awe in the course of chapters 41 to 50. We have a discussion of a realm of a range of emotions of awe and awe of Hashem, and a range of emotions of love of Hashem, kind of in a hierarchy. Some are greater forms of love of Hashem, some are less intense, more basic forms of love. And we're going to take in a meditation on both of them to describe how the Tanya kind of takes us through a process of just starting to create these feelings of love and awe of Hashem. Let me ask you which one do you think comes first? Awe or love? When it comes to us creating a foundation in our awe, why?
Kind of like you are all there to do something, whether you want it or not. What you do out of love is you want to do it. Maybe that's the next step.
Okay, good. Okay. So you're up. All comes first.
I also think that part of it has to do with relationship, for me at least, through my personal experience.
Good.
My relationship with Hashem began in a position of me being just Adam, and obviously the Jewish faith and the Torah and everything that I looked at as being the representation of what God was to me was much bigger. And so it initially began something where the things that I'm supposed to not do is more how I get integrated to Hashem's space. And then I develop some more of a understanding of relationship, and then I can develop some natural love and admiration and
Okay. Let's just point out a second. We're not talking about which ones come first in our performance of mitzvahs. Should we focus on the 365 don'ts before we do the 248? No, that's not what we're talking about, because the mitzvahs of the Torah are all the mitzvahs of the Torah. We're talking about in terms of creating a relationship, in terms of building up the relationship. What needs to be the ground foundation of the relationship? Think about a relationship when it comes to human relationships, right? So let's think about how that plays out in human relationships. You've got a couple where the husband is, let's give an example of awe and love in the relationship. The husband is driving home from work and he plans on stopping at the store to get something, and the wife calls him up on the phone and says, sorry, honey, I need you home now, please don't go to the store. She doesn't explain herself. Don't go to the store, please come home right away. The husband respects his wife's wishes. Does he understand it? No, not necessarily. But this is what she wants, and that's what I'll do. And she comes home. We're translating awe as kind of a respect in our space, because awe ultimately means I give you respect. I recognize that it's not about me, it's about you. And awe is it's about you. And therefore I just get out of the way kind of thing, because that's what awe brings us to. We just kind of get out of the way because we're in awe, we're overwhelmed. And I feel my insignificance. It's not about me, it's about you. That's what awe does. Whereas love is much, in a certain sense, a little more egocentric. Like, what can I do for you? Which plays a lot more on the feeling of my love towards you. How do I feel about it? And love is a more egocentric kind of emotion. Awe is not egocentric. Awe is, it's not about me at all, it's about you. So love in the instance of the husband and wife will be an example of where you are driving home from work and you're tired on a whole long day of work, and your wife says, would you mind stopping at the store and buying something for me? And you go and you buy something. Why? Because I love my wife. I did something for her. Now, what happens if you only have love and you don't have awe? Or you only have awe and you don't have love? Well, which way you're worse off in a certain sense. And let's talk about in relationships. Awe, so love without awe is the spouse who the wife says, please don't leave the dishes in the sink. Rinse them and put them on the side. Please don't leave your socks on the floor. Put them in the hamper, right? And he always does. And he always leaves the dishes in the. And then he sends a big, beautiful bouquet of flowers saying, "Oh, you are my love." How is she going to appreciate those flowers?
No,
She won't. Because
she knows that
love,
every week she gets that because he doesn't put the dishes in.
because love without respect is meaningless. Respect needs to be in place first. You have to have that respect. You have to have, you respect me for who I am. You don't have to agree with me. You don't have to understand why I want the things that I want. But it's important to me, and the relationship is you respect me for who I am. It's not about you. It's about me. And because it's about me, you want to do what I want. Love is, it's also about you. How does it make me feel? And how can I do things to express my love? So when I get that big, beautiful bouquet of flowers, I feel good about it. I gave my wife something. Am I ready to squeeze myself and make myself disappear and really get rid of my ego and do things which I'm not ready for someone else? Not necessarily. That love without respect is meaningless. Very important lesson in relationships. Super important. Let me tell you, from what I've seen with ladies, they can see straight through love if there's no respect, right? The respect has to be there.
And I have a small addition to that.
Okay.
Men can see it.
Yeah. It's true. Everyone sees. Everyone sees.
Of course.
Ultimately, everyone sees. You could see it. Is it hollow? It's not hollow. It might be real love. But ultimately, it's meaningless. Because you don't, the first foremost thing that needs to be in place is that respect. So if we're talking about all of Hashem, and we're talking about love of Hashem, which is the first thing we need to cultivate? All. Okay? Now, by the way, just to point out that the same thing is with children. You think sometimes you could just love your children, you don't have to respect them. It's actually it's a big mistake. You know, like a kid, some people, you actually sometimes see it where I want to kiss my kid a kid, give my kiss a kid, give my kid a kiss right now, right? The kid's like, "Oh, I don't want a kiss," and I'm a dad. I can go give my kid a kiss, and do you think that's the right thing to do? Absolutely not. Everyone needs to be respected, and the same thing, respect needs to be in place before love. Otherwise, it's not. You're gonna be hurting. You're not demonstrating true love, and it's not going to have the desired effect you're looking to have. Same thing with Hashem. If I'm going to turn around to God and say, "God, I love you. I'm ready to do anything for you. Tell me what to do. I'll do all these mitzvahs," and God says, "You know what? Don't eat pork. Don't work on Shabbos." Like, God, you know what I mean? Tell me what I can do for you. Don't do those things. You can live with that. I find out you can live with me working on Shabbos. You can live with that. Tell me. No, that's ultimately what we're talking about. We're talking about creating a field of respect and awe for God, which is, and that's in place first. This is what it's important. You want me to not mix wool and leather, and I don't have a clue why you want me to do that. I don't see any problem with mixing wool and linen. But God, that's what you want. I respect you. I'm in awe of you. I recognize who God is, and I'm ready to do His will, regardless of my own self and my own ego within that picture. Okay? Now, let's take a look at text 1, which takes us through the text, which is going to serve as the meditation, really, to instill within us and create within us this awe of God. Who would like to? No, maybe I'll take it. Okay, text 1, and it's quite a long text, but it's needs to be broken up. Okay. One must, however, constantly bear in mind what is the beginning of the service of God, as well as its core and roots. No, what's the beginning of service in the garden? What's core and root? Oh, what is that? One must first arouse the innate awe which lies hidden in the heart of every Jew, not to rebel against the supreme King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be He. Okay, so that's the introduction. This means that he should at least contemplate within his mind. Okay, remember this is all happening where? In our mind. We're going to be mitbonen. We're going to take this idea and we're going to meditate on it. Pointedly concentrate on this idea and mull it over within our thoughts, to create an emotion. The greatness of the blessed infinite. So we start off with infinite. God is infinite. Recognize that God is infinite. And his, infinite is pretty, what does that do to us? What is it, when you say something is infinite, then
It's very expensive.
and how does that make you feel? Makes you feel old?
Makes
And
me
doesn't-
feel small, but it makes me feel small in the respect of feeling held in the space of something so tremendous.
Okay.
So a bit of both.
Okay, so at this point, when we just focus on God's infinity, it's really you're moving on to the next part already. It's just about us, our insignificance in a certain sense, and His kingship. Now, whenever we refer to God as being king, especially in the language of Kabbalah, a king, ein melech v'lo am. A king has to have a kingdom which he has to rule over. Otherwise, he's not a king. He's a king. By definition, when we call God a king, it means that we are his subjects. So we're talking about God. He's infinite. And he has determined that he wants to be a king, which means he wants to enter into a relationship with us. Well, which extends to all worlds, both high and lower. So the God's kingship is both in the high worlds and in the lower worlds. In the language of there's worlds which exist beyond our world, our physical world, and God's king over all of them. Yet he leaves aside the creatures of the high worlds and the creatures of the lower worlds, and uniquely bestows his kingship upon his people Israel in general, and upon him in particular. So from this infinite God, who is the creator of all being, who is infinite beyond any definitions, whatsoever, he decides to enter into a relationship with the people of Israel in general, and upon me in particular. Now we're talking about, obviously, he gives us a purpose to bring to the world. God gives the Jewish people a purpose, to be a light unto the nations, like we spoke last time, to make the world a godly place, right? So that is God leaving everything and saying, guys, I want this relationship. I'm giving you a purpose to fulfill within this relationship. You got something. Upon him in particular, who's him? No?
Or the person.
The person in particular. So I'm thinking, exactly. I'm thinking, and I am the only look, continue. For each person, see, the electricity is in the air, it's starting to. For each person is obliged to say, for my sake was the world created. Very interesting. The Talmud says that every being was created, wasn't created alone. Things were created in pairs. The only being which was created alone in one was Adam, human. Human being was first, Adam was created, and then Chava was created from Adam. But why that process? All other things were created in pairs, were created in multiples, because exactly this, for my sake the world was created. Every person can turn around and say, the whole world is for one individual. So each person is obliged to say, for my sake was the world created. So what are we saying? So God becomes a king and he leaves aside everything and he uniquely bestows his kingship upon every single person so that every person can say the world was created for me. What does that mean? What does that do to us? When God's saying
Creates a love.
it creates a love, okay. I'm saying what are we talking about? God's he is bestowing his kingship upon us that we are accountable, we are responsible, we fulfill a purpose within the scheme of everything, right? And he, for his part, accepts his kingship upon himself, that he be king over him. And the individual, now, recognizing all of this, will enter into this relationship with God to serve him and do his will in all kinds of work and service. And, okay, so now that I've seen God's left everything, he's kind of really made himself small to a certain sense, to enter into a relationship with us, to give us a unique purpose, and put in our hands the destiny of the fulfillment of this world. So that makes, I step into that position now, to do God's, tell me what to do. Yeah, the recognition of how awesome that is, and that idea is so mind-blowing, and how insignificant, and God says here, guys, that gives us an enormous, we step into that role now. And behold, God himself stands over him, yet at the same time the whole world is filled with his glory, and he scrutinizes him and searches his inner parts in his heart to see if he is serving him as fitting. Therefore, he must serve in his presence with awe, like one standing before the king. So the end part is saying, God does all of that, and he's watching you. You're standing in his presence. This is not just him handing it over. He's aware of everything that's going on. And he scrutinizes look at that. His inner parts and his heart. So he knows what's going on inside. And he knows what you're thinking about. He knows to see if he is serving him as fitting. And he concludes, therefore he must serve in his presence with all like one standing for the king. Okay. This is the all meditation. If we can look in contemplation on all worksheet, which is the learning activity, page 124. So here we have really the text of the Tanya, really each piece kind of broken it out. So if we're going to go through it, the greatness of the blessed infinite. What idea does that present us? So I'm saying, what is in the process of working through the idea, right? That's where they're always going to be the outcome. We're now working on the contemplation. We're working on the opponent. What are we thinking through? So we're thinking through the greatness of the blessed infinite, which means God is beyond. God is, tremendous. And his kingship, we're really reviewing what we just did together. And his kingship, yet, with all that, he relates to us. Yeah? Which extends to all worlds, both higher and lower. And right, ultimately, is that we're here in this world. Yet he leaves aside the higher and uniquely bestows his kingship. What does he do? All of that God leaves aside just for this relationship. Upon his people in Israel in general, and upon him in particular, with me, with people, Jewish people, all me in particular, for each person can say, my world, what I do matters, what I do counts, makes a difference. And we continue, and for his part, that he be king over him is a person saying, I accept this relationship. And I agree to serve. God, behold, God stands over him. I recognize God is here. Yet at the same time, the whole world is full of glory. The same God who is beyond, who is really beyond everything, is completely infinite. He's here. He scrutinizes him and searches in the part of his heart. He's watching me to see what I'm doing. So it's a wild idea when you think about it. And we can do the meditation now, but we've got the tools to do the meditation. But just think about even just going through this process right now, discussing this. What does that do to you? What feelings has it created? Any feeling? Just even the process of discussing it, you feel a little bit of an awe towards God. Whoa, am I going to do something wrong that He doesn't want me to do? How could I? Right? Now, very interesting to point out here is that is there any word of punishment here? You see one word of punishment?
No judgment.
It's not about punishment one drop. It's not about punishment because remember, when I don't do something because I'm worried about being punished, who's it about?
Sorry.
This meditation is about me. Who's it about? About Him. That's the difference. That's all. That's precisely it. Or it's not about me. It's about Him. I lose myself here. And therefore I'm ready to do things that even I don't appreciate, I don't understand, or I don't, but it's important to Him, I'm going to do it. Yeah.
You know, it's supposed to, it sounds to me like awe is really a very strong sign, if not incentive, to get myself out of the way and just to be open to where I'm at.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. So this is the basic awe meditation. And what's an interesting thing was which you think about it is this idea that a person thinks that God is here and He's watching. Now, to know what I'm doing is there's Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. It references in text 2. We won't go through it. But in text 2, it says Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai used to tell his students, he said, may it be your God's will that the awe of heaven be upon you like the awe of a human being. Here in text 2?
Middle of the paragraph. It's 126. Middle of the paragraph.
So he would tell his students that. Does that sound like a self-understood to you? The awe of heaven be upon you like the awe of a human being? You have awe of a human being? You have awe of a human being?
I think I missed something. I don't understand.
You don't understand.
No, I think I missed a sentence you just said.
You just right where we're up to here, or you lost us before?
No,
Just
right
yet.
here, yes.
So what we're bringing Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's statement, which he said, may the awe of heaven be upon you like the awe of a human being. Meaning to say, the same way you're afraid of humans, you should be afraid of God. Now, what are we talking about? We're talking about what we're referring to is think about how we behave when we know people are watching and when we think people are not watching. Do we should behave different? Absolutely. When you're sitting over the pot and busy picking and maybe not doing, and then someone walks into the room, will you do the same thing? When you're drinking out of a bottle maybe, and you don't have the patience to get a cup, and someone walks in the room and like all of a sudden, we all do that, right? Because we have a natural, we behave differently when we realize we're in the presence of someone. If I'm a guest in someone's house, on the more so. Now, all of that coupled with being recognized in God's presence. And God, who is awesome God, and I'm standing in His presence, and He's aware, and He's here, and that's what the Yochanan ben Zakkai says. At least, at the very minimum, our fear of God should be like the fear of another person. Recognizing that God is being conscious of His presence. Not knowing about His presence, being conscious, feeling His presence constantly, recognizing God's here. Okay? What does that leave us with? Let's take the takeaway on text 3, page 127. Sorry. No, let's go straight to text 4. Adam, you want to read for us? 129.
Verse 4. Now, each individual Jew, whoever he may be, when he ponders upon this for a considerable time each day, how God is truly omnipresent in the higher and lower worlds, and the actual heaven and earth is truly filled with his glory, that he looks, seeks, and searches his inner parts and his heart, and all his actions and words, and counts his every step, then all will be implanted in his heart throughout the day. Later, when he will again contemplate this, even with a superficial reflection at any time or moment, he will turn away from evil and do good in thought, speech, and action, so as not to rebel, God forbid, in the sight of his glory, whereof the whole world is filled. This is in accord with the statement of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai to his disciples, quoted above. This, then, is the meaning of the verse. God demands of you only to have awe of the Lord your God, to walk in all his ways. Devarim, Deuteronomy 10:12. For this is the awe that leads to the fulfillment of God's commandments, turning away from evil and doing good. Chapter 42.
Chapter 42, yeah. Okay, so we're basically saying, we lay down the foundation. We're saying if every day there's actually some people who say that section of Tanya every day before prayer. Every day before prayer, they say text 1. That meditation we're going through, that's if I lay that down as the foundation of my day, and I'm going to refer back to that thought process. Think about those feelings that it's going to, how is it going to change me as a person? How is it going to refine me as a person? It's not only to refrain from doing, it's going to change how I behave in general. I'm going to behave like a different person. I'm going to behave like a more refined person. I'm going to, because I recognize that first of all, the responsibility, the awesomeness of it all, and I'm in God's presence, and he's counting on me. Whoa, it's big stuff. He's aware of how I'm doing. So this is the one, a basic meditation of awe which Tanya presents. Tanya talks about other levels of awe, like I said. How does this relate to fear? Fear is a bad translation of the word yira. That's not fear. Fear also has that emotion of stay away, but it's a negative thing. Fear is negative. Fear is all about, that thing poses a threat, or that thing, whatever it is. Awe doesn't do that. Awe is just because of the greatness of that thing. I lose myself and I take a step back in process of that losing myself. It doesn't draw me in. Kind of just, I don't know. Yeah, does that answer your question about the fear?
Yes, it's ayira.
Yira.
Yira.
Yira. Yira is fear. Is awe.
Mm-hmm.
Bad translation here. Yeah. So often when people talk about fear, it's really, this is what the idea that we're talking about. We're talking about an awe of God. Okay. Now let's move on to love. Okay. So we've laid down a basic meditation for love. And the love meditation is a easy meditation. Tanya's going to go through what we're going to focus on the easy one, which is a natural meditation. That's a meditation which you want to be guaranteed to like someone. The easiest way to get a feeling of love back from someone else is show love towards them. King Solomon says, our heart reflects naturally. That's how we respond. If someone does, just even think about a setting of strangers, right? If someone does something and kind of holds the door for you, someone brings you a cup of water, all of a sudden, I kind of feel that closeness to that person. I kind of feel that like reciprocating. It's called a reciprocal emotion, where someone gives you something and you reciprocate that, that's the emotion, that's the meditation that Tanya's going to focus on. To create a fear, a love of God at a basic level, focus on a reciprocal idea, which will generate automatically your reciprocal, stimulate that element within you. When you think about how God, that will want you to reciprocate in kind, that feelings of closeness. Okay? By the way, just in general, it's recommended to love God, because if you don't love God, you're going to have a pretty miserable life. You'll be much better off if you can be angry at God, absolutely, but being angry at God doesn't usually enhance the quality of your life. Having a loving relationship with God does.
Gives you a chance.
It gives you a
Fighting
chance.
chance.
Yeah, it definitely helps. So let's take a look at this beautiful parable that the Tanya is describing in text number 5, okay? Page 130. It's a long text, so we'll just read through it quickly in the whole thing, and then we'll just review it outside together, okay? There is yet another direct way, equally applicable to every person, to arouse and kindle the light of the love that is implanted and concealed in his heart. That is to take to heart the meaning of the verse, as water mirrors the face to the face, so does the heart of one person mirror the other. Just on time, Michael. This means that, as in the case of the likeness and features of the face, which a person presents the water, the identical face is reflected back from the water, right? You look in, you see your reflection. That's what King Solomon said. So also the heart of a person who is loyal and affection for another. For this love awakens a loving response for him or her in the heart of the friend also, so that they come to love each other loyally. Okay, so far so good. Think about it. If you want to elicit a positive response from someone, do something positive towards them. Show them some love, the chances are you'll get some love back. Such is the common nature in the character of every person, even when they, the lover and beloved, are equal in status. How much more so if a great and mighty king displays his great intense love for a commoner, who is despised and lowly among men, a disgraceful creature cast on the dunghill. Yet the king comes down to him from the place of his glory, together with all of his retinue, and raises him and exalts him from his dunghill and brings him into his palace, the royal palace, in the innermost chamber, a place as no servant nor lord ever enters, and there shares with him the closest companionship, with embraces and kisses, an attachment of spirit to spirit with their whole heart and soul. How much more so will there be aroused automatically a doubled and redoubled love in the heart of this most common and humble individual for the king, with a true attachment of spirit from heart and soul, from the infinite depths of his heart, even if his heart be like a heart of stone, will surely melt and become like water, and his soul will pour itself like water with soulful longing the love of the king. How's that? This is actually the Tanya is describing the process of the exodus from Egypt. Jewish people are in Exodus, and in the dumps of the dumps, and God goes and rises them and brings them into his palace and gives them the Torah, etc., etc. And this uses that to describe this parable, the king with the pauper and the dunghill raising him up. Think about it in our own life. Think about our metaphorical Egypt. We're stuck in stuff, whatever it is. And God demonstrates his love. He gives us a purpose. He gives us meaning. He says that you are important. You are valuable. And he brings all of that, and he says, I'm counting on you. Come, let's do this together. And he's holding our hand, and he's guiding us, and he's supporting us. What does that do? It creates a love. Creates a feeling of a reciprocal love. So, what's interesting is just you ever heard the statement, kill them with love, kill them with kindness, which is you know, when someone, you can't, when someone demonstrates, you're gonna get that kind of response as well. What's interesting about this parable is who is it talking to? Is it talking to the tzaddik? Is like to arouse this love. If you are, will this work better for the person who's of a higher spiritual status or a lower spiritual status? Well, even lower. So it actually works best because the lower you are, the greater and more intense the parable becomes of the king who's descending to me and me with all my schmutz and all my nonsense with all my rubbish, and he wants me and he's whoa. God really count me. I love him. I want to reciprocate. I want to do something for him. He's doing all the stuff for me. I want to give him some nachas, you know, some joy. So this is the awe and the love. We lay down the awe, which is going to be the motivator for, I don't understand it, but God's important to you, I'm gonna do it. I don't have to understand it. It's not about me. It's about you. It's important for you, and even with all my stuff, I'm going to put I'm ready to squeeze myself for you because, you know, I recognize how you're counting on me within this whole big picture. Whereas this is about you do all the stuff for me, you know, like you doing your stuff for me. I'm ready to do it. You know, I want to make you happy. That's what love does. Love motivates the positive performance in this. So I'm saying you could just use this analogy if you have, I don't know, if Bill Gates would call you tomorrow and say, you mind helping me with the tweet? I don't know. Right? Bill Gates, call it true. Right? You feel like a $1 million. And from then on, if anyone say anything about Bill Gates, you'd probably say, Bill Gates is the best guy ever. Why? Because Bill Gates made you feel good. That aroused you with that kind of feel. Okay. We have arrived at chapter 51. And the last 3 chapters of Tanya, 51, 52, and 53, are a whole different topic. They really revert back to a topic which we brought up in the chapters of 34 and 35 about the purpose of being in this world. And we once again refer back to the candle, the wick, and the fire. Remember the parable? And we remember what was the oil. Mitzvah. Good. The wick. Body. Good. Nice. Beautiful. And the flame is the flame is kind of the effect which we create within this world, the godly life which we bring into the world. Now, the Tanya points out that ultimately the whole perspective of a person looking at his body as a liability within his service of God is a big mistake. Because can I do mitzvahs with my soul? So can I create a flame with just a wick, with just oil? No, I need to light up that oil. How do I light up the oil? With the body, and then I create the flame. So yes, the body, and when we say the body, we're talking about what animates the body. What animates the body? Which soul? Animal. The animal soul animates the body, right? And I'm going to talk about if I let the animal soul run my life, it's miserable. But if I bring my animal soul to the table and I use the energy and I use the passion of the animal soul and I get it to on board with doing mitzvahs, with using all that energy to go and serve God. Well, guess what? That's where the magic happens. Now you've got even more fuel to go and create beautiful, awesome light and fire, flame of Hashem. So this is a really, Tanya finishes off with this message of really kind of redefining our relationship with our body. And our body is not a hindrance. It can be a hindrance if we allow it to become a hindrance and allow it to run our life. But if we utilize and we use the power and the energy that it presents, and the animal and all that it brings to the table, and we harness it to serve God, that's where the magic happens. That's where we can serve God in the fullest way. And just to finish off with the story, which maybe brings us out in a beautiful way, they tell the story about the Baal Shem Tov, that Baal Shem Tov was shown a vision of the person that's going to be next to him in the world to come. And he sees this guy who is this tzaddik who presses a whole day. He's extremely fat. And he presses all day. Now he eats a whole day. Now he's eating all day, not just he goes and anything he can go, he eats and eats. Also like, this is the guy I would be next to. Gosh, what did I do wrong in my life? But he's the tzaddik. What's going on here? So he seeks out this person and he says to him, no, tell me. What's the story? Why are you eating like this? He says, I'll tell you the truth. My dad, my father, was a pious man. He was a porush. He was an ascetic, which means he kind of disconnected from worldly pleasures. Not only from pleasures, but even basic necessities. Absolutely to the minimum. He was a stick, literally a stick. He was like a walking skeleton, and extremely fragile, extremely flimsy. Anyways, to our town, the Catholics arrived, and they took my dad and they lit him on fire together with the pogrom, and he burned. You know how quickly he burned? Like this. And I said, never will I let, if the goyim are going to come, I'm going to burn for God big time. And I eat so that when I can sanctify God's name, I'm going to burn for God. That was his eating for L'Shem Shamayim, his eating to sanctify heaven. So this was, now I'm saying, for me, if I would think about that when it comes to, I probably wouldn't eat, you know. For him, you know, he meant it. Everybody was taking, I'm eating for one purpose only, to sanctify God's name. Get more fat than myself, to sanctify God's name. So it's not just that he was using it as a trick. He truly meant this. This was his ambition everything turned into his whole bodily experience was part of serving God. And he did it through this unique way because he can burn for God, which is a wild story. But this is how the Tanya finishes up with this message, and about the purpose of the being in this world. It all happens here with our body, bringing ourselves and our animals to the table, not ignoring it, but rather utilizing our animalistic energies to use them for good, beautiful purposes in serving God, and that's how we transform the world. Okay. L'chaim. Excellent. We have concluded the book of Tanya in 6 weeks. Excellent. And please God, the plan is, if there's interest, to start a regular Tanya class, which will go through Tanya chapter by chapter and really going through and more saying this was the bird's eye view, but so much which we glossed over, which we didn't really get a chance to properly investigate. And I'm saying there's so many more ideas. It's a whole book, right? We just gave a couple of brief concepts, some core ideas, and there's Hashem to go through it to properly learn Tanya and change our lives through Tanya. So, thank you all for being
Thank you very much.
here. I'll stop the recording.
I'm gonna shoot quickly.